always believed family was supposed to have your back. That no matter what happened, your parents, your siblings, they would always stand by you. At least that's what I thought. But as time went on, I realized that wasn't how it worked in my family. My parents had a favorite, my brother, and it wasn't subtle. It was like I was invisible, like nothing I did ever mattered. He was the golden child. He got all the attention, the praise, and the best opportunities. Every achievement of his was celebrated while mine was brushed aside. They'd throw him grand birthday parties, pay for his expensive hobbies, and shower him with love, while I was left in the background trying to get noticed, and believe me, I tried. But it never worked. My parents seemed to always have a soft spot for him. It wasn't just that they loved him more, it was that they ignored me completely. Whenever I did something great, it was never enough to gain their attention. Whenever I worked hard for something, they always found a way to shift the focus back to him. It felt like a constant reminder that no matter what I did, it would never be enough. Then came the day when I finally thought I'd broken through. I bought my parents a gift, a brand new car. I saved up for months, cutting back on things I enjoyed, sacrificing my own comforts, just to give them something that would show I appreciated everything they'd done for me. It wasn't just a car. It was my way of saying, I'm here. I matter. I expected them to be happy. I expected them to thank me, to finally see me as someone worthy of recognition. But instead, they took the car, smiled, and said, thanks. It wasn't the joy, the excitement, or the appreciation I had hoped for. No, it was just another casual acceptance of what I'd done. And once again, they went back to talking about my brother, his accomplishments, and his future. I felt invisible all over again. Months passed, and I couldn't shake the feeling of being taken for granted. But then, something changed. My parents showed up at my door. At first, I was confused, expecting them to ask how I was doing, or maybe thank me again for the car. But no, this time was different. They needed something. They didn't want my company or my love. They wanted money. They asked for a loan, something they'd never done before. Their tone was desperate, and it felt like they assumed I would just give it to them. After all, I was always the helpful one, the one they could rely on when times got tough. They needed me, but they had no idea how much they'd hurt me over the years, how much I'd been overlooked in favor of my brother. And that's when it hit me. They didn't care about me. They didn't care about what I had done, or the sacrifices I'd made. They didn't care about me as a person. They cared about what I could do for them. They had used me all along, and now when they were desperate, they were back to do it again. I knew right then and there I had to make a choice. I wasn't going to let them walk all over me anymore. This time, I was going to make them regret how they treated me. I would no longer be the person they could just call when they needed something. It was time for me to stand up and take control of my own life. I often felt like I was invisible, like I wasn't even a part of my own family. My brother, on the other hand, was the golden child. He was always the first choice in everything, and I was just there. My parents never seemed to notice the things I did, no matter how hard I worked. But my brother, he could do no wrong. And he didn't even try that hard to win their affection. It started when we were kids. Whenever my parents had a special event, like a birthday or a celebration, the spotlight was always on him. He was the one who got the newest toys, the biggest celebrations, and the best treatment. I remember feeling the sting of being left out, but I tried not to let it bother me. I tried to tell myself that maybe one day they'd see me too. But as we grew older, I realized that wasn't going to happen. I worked hard in school. I would spend hours studying, trying to make my parents proud. But whenever I did well, there was no praise. Nothing. My brother, though, he'd get praise for the smallest things. A good test score, a little achievement here and there, and my parents would throw a huge celebration for him. But when I did well, I'd get a good job, and that was it. There was no real celebration, no excitement. It was like my accomplishments didn't matter at all. I had always been the quieter one, trying to stay out of the way, and it seemed like that's exactly what my parents wanted. As I got older, I started noticing how much they favored him. I had always hoped that one day, they'd realize how much I had been sacrificing to make them happy. But the more I tried to prove myself, the more they seemed to push me aside. My brother had it easy. He never had to work as hard as I did for anything. He got into the best schools, had the best opportunities, and never had to worry about anything. But me? I had to fight for every little thing. Nothing came easy. The resentment started to build up, but I tried to keep it to myself. I didn't want to seem like the bitter sibling. But the more they ignored me, the more I felt like I wasn't a part of their world. It was always about him, always about his future, his success. And every time they praised him, I felt more invisible. When I was old enough to move out and get my own place, I thought that maybe, just maybe, things would change. Maybe I could show my parents that I was capable of doing things on my own. But when I bought a car for them, when I made that sacrifice, I thought I'd finally get their approval. I thought I'd finally get that recognition. But they didn't even bat an eye. It was like the car didn't matter, and neither did I. Then came the day when everything changed. My parents showed up at my door. They weren't here to check in on me or even to thank me for the car. No, this time, they were here for something else. They needed money. They needed a loan, and they needed it badly. It was like they had no idea what they'd put me through all these years. They expected me to drop everything, to help them out without hesitation. And honestly, that's when I finally snapped. I realized they didn't care about me at all. They cared about what I could do for them when they needed it. They were still using me, just like they always had. I couldn't let them do this to me anymore. I had given them so much, worked so hard to prove myself, and all they'd done was treat me like a second-class citizen. The time had come to finally take control of my life and make them see just how wrong they were about me. I knew I couldn't just hand them the money like they expected. After years of neglect and unfair treatment, I wasn't going to let them walk back into my life as if nothing had happened. They hadn't earned my trust or respect, and I wasn't about to let them think they could continue to use me whenever they wanted. I started thinking about how I could make them understand, but I didn't want to do it in a way that would just anger them. I wanted them to feel the weight of their actions, to realize just how much they had taken me for granted. I started looking into the family finances. I knew my parents had always been secretive about money, but I had a feeling they were in deep. I spent days gathering information, checking bank records, and asking around. I even reached out to a couple of mutual friends who were close to my parents just to get a sense of what was really going on behind closed doors. The more I dug, the more I realized that things were much worse than I'd imagined. My parents weren't just asking for a loan, they were in serious trouble. They had been spending money recklessly for years, living beyond their means. They had built up so much debt that they were on the verge of losing everything. Their house, their cars, and every single thing they'd worked for seemed to be slipping through their fingers. But here they were, coming to me for help, expecting me to bail them out like I had done in the past. The more I uncovered, the more I felt a sense of disgust. They had treated me like I was invisible all these years, yet they thought they could turn to me when they were in need. It was like they had no idea how much I had sacrificed for them, how many times I had been overlooked, ignored, and even disrespected. But now they needed me. They needed my money to fix their mess. They couldn't have cared less about my struggles, my dreams, my life. I started coming up with a plan. It wasn't just about refusing to give them the money. They didn't deserve it. No, I wanted to expose them for what they had done to me. I wanted to show them just how much they had taken advantage of me, to make them understand the emotional toll their actions had taken on me. I wasn't going to let them walk away from this like they always had. This time, they would have to face the consequences of their neglect and mistreatment. But I also knew that if I was going to do this, I needed to be smart. I couldn't just confront them head-on. I had to make sure they felt the full weight of their betrayal without giving them an easy way out. They couldn't simply brush me off or manipulate me again. This time I was in control. I started pulling together the evidence, gathering everything I needed to make them see how badly they had wronged me. I even went as far as to find out who they owed money to and what kind of deals they had been making behind my back. I knew that if I could expose their financial situation and the reckless way they had been living, it would hit them where it hurt most. Their pride. I wasn't doing this to be cruel, but I couldn't keep letting them treat me like I was nothing. If they were going to ask for help, they had to understand the damage they had done to me. They had to see just how much they had taken from me without ever giving anything back. The day was coming when I was going to confront them, when I was going to make them realize that I wasn't the same person I once was. I was stronger now, wiser, and ready to take control of my own life. I wasn't going to let them walk all over me anymore. The day had arrived. I had everything in place, all the research, the evidence, the documents, and the recordings. Everything was ready. I could feel the anger building up inside me. But it wasn't just anger anymore. It was a sense of calm determination. I wasn't just going to refuse to give them money. I was going to make them face the full consequences of their actions. They thought they could control me, but now I was in the driver's seat. I invited them over to my place under the guise of helping them out. They thought it was just another one of their attempts to manipulate me. But I had other plans. When they arrived, I could see the nervous excitement in their eyes, as though they expected me to hand over the money without hesitation. I didn't even let them settle into their seats before I began. "I know what you've been up to," I said, my voice calm but firm. Their eyes widened, and I could see the panic setting in. "What are you talking about?" my dad asked, trying to maintain control. I pulled out the documents I had gathered one by one. The bank statements, the loan papers, the proof of their debts. I could feel the tension in the room rise as I laid it all out before them. They weren't expecting this. They thought they could manipulate me into just giving them money again. But instead, I was flipping the script. I was in control now, and I wasn't going to back down. "You've been living like this for years, spending recklessly, getting into debt, and you thought I wouldn't find out," I continued, keeping my eyes locked with theirs. "You thought you could just waltz into my life and ask for money again without any consequences." Their faces turned pale, and for the first time I saw a glimpse of fear in their eyes. This was the moment I had been waiting for. They had to face the truth. I wasn't the naive person they could manipulate anymore. I had grown stronger, wiser, and I wasn't going to let them treat me like a pawn in their game. But I wasn't done. The biggest part of my plan was yet to come. I leaned back in my chair and let them stew in the silence for a moment. Then I made the final reveal. "I've been paying your bills for years," I said, my voice low and steady. "For 4 years, I've been covering your debts, your expenses, thinking I was doing the right thing. But you took advantage of that, didn't you? You never once thought about how much that hurt me, how much it drained me. And now when you're in a mess of your own making, you expect me to clean it up. Well, I'm not doing it anymore." They tried to apologize, to beg, but I could see the panic in their eyes. The realization was sinking in. They weren't going to get away with it this time. I wasn't going to be the one they used anymore. I wasn't going to be the one they relied on to bail them out of their mess. And as I sat there watching them squirm, I couldn't help but feel a sense of satisfaction. They had underestimated me. They thought I was weak, that I wouldn't stand up for myself. But I had become someone different. Someone who wouldn't take their abuse anymore. Someone who had found their strength and wasn't afraid to use it. The room was heavy with the tension of the moment. My parents, once so sure of themselves, now had nothing left to cling to. They were exposed. Their lies, their manipulation, their neglect. All of it was laid bare, and they couldn't do a thing about it. As I watched them try to salvage whatever dignity they had left, I realized that I had finally taken control of my life. No longer would I be their scapegoat. No longer would I be the one they turned to when they needed something. This was my moment. And as they left, defeated and humiliated, I knew I had made the right choice. It wasn't just about the money. It was about my own self-worth, about putting myself first for once. I wasn't going to let anyone take advantage of me again. It wasn't long before my parents realized the full weight of what I had done. They tried calling, sending texts, even showing up at my door, but I wasn't interested in hearing their apologies. They had taken me for granted for so long that it was hard to even believe their words. They begged for forgiveness, for another chance to fix things. But I wasn't the same person anymore. I had been broken down so many times by them, but now I was whole again, stronger than I ever had been. For the first time in years, I felt at peace. I didn't have to constantly worry about my parents and their endless cycle of mistakes and manipulations. The phone calls became fewer, and eventually, they stopped altogether. And in that silence, I began to heal. I moved on. I focused on my own life, on my goals, and on rebuilding the trust I had lost in myself. I started putting myself first in every decision. It was liberating. I began traveling, reconnecting with old friends, and pursuing hobbies I had abandoned for years. It felt like I was finally living the life I was supposed to. As for my parents, they were left to face the consequences of their actions. They lost more than just the money they had asked me for. They lost the relationship with their own child. It became clear to them that their attempts at manipulation wouldn't work anymore. They could no longer control me. I heard from a few family members about how they were struggling, losing their home, drowning in debt, and now facing the realization that they had no one to turn to. They had burned all their bridges, and I wasn't about to let them rebuild one with me. My heart had hardened, and the thought of helping them never crossed my mind. They didn't deserve it. Months passed, and I saw them slowly come to terms with the fact that I was no longer part of their lives in the way they had hoped. My mother reached out one last time. She told me how sorry she was, how much she regretted everything, but I wasn't buying it. I had already moved on, and I wasn't about to go back to the same toxic cycle. I had taken control of my life, and I wasn't going to let anyone take that from me again. For the first time, I realized my own worth, and it wasn't tied to how much I could give or sacrifice for someone else. I wasn't their backup plan anymore. I was my own person, and that was enough. Looking back, I don't regret a single thing. Cutting them off was the hardest decision I've ever made, but it was also the best one. I had given them more chances than they deserved, and now I was finally free. There's a certain power in standing up for yourself and knowing when enough is enough. And now I'll never let anyone, family, friends, or anyone else, treat me like I'm less than I am. I know my worth, and I will never allow anyone to take advantage of it again. My life is mine now, and that's exactly how I want it.